Shalom uvracha to everyone. It's Thursday morning, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, a month and a half before Purim. So you might start thinking of 2 weeks before Tu B'Shvat. I know we're in the middle of winter, but we can start to think a little bit about the future and the blossoms that are going to come our way during the course of this month. I hope everybody is well. For some, this is going to be the last week coming up of school, and then the yeshiva vacation, which I hope everyone stays safe and again takes all the precautions and does everything that is right in terms of health wise. I know that some of us in our community are starting to get the vaccine, and I hope that goes well, and hopefully for our country, for our community, for our state, for our nation, that the rollout moves quicker and everyone gets an opportunity to, in fact, get the vaccine, and hopefully that'll start to drive the numbers down and hopefully save lives more quickly rather than later. I don't like Darwinism. What, Rabbi? You don't believe in Darwin? You don't believe in evolution? Well, let me explain myself. I actually do believe very much in the evolutionary theory of the theory of evolution of the development of the world. I don't think it's inconsistent with a religious perspective in terms of God setting into motion um, all kinds of processes of evolution. But there is part of Darwinism that I very strongly object to, and all of us, I think, strongly object to, and that's certainly the borrowing of terms and concepts from Darwinism, from the world of biology and the development of species to the world of the social realm, what we might call what we used to call social Darwinism. And when we talk about natural selection and things like that, and people transfer it to the social realm, we get into very, very dangerous territory. This week's Parsha, of course, is kind of the paradigmatic Parsha of the challenge to a caste system, challenge to that one of those first great empires that enslaved people and saw people as cogs rather than as individuals created in the name and in the spirit and the image of God. The Mitzrayim regime, the Egyptian regime, that saw people in a caste mode, different categories, depending on who you were and whether you were entitled to basic rights. Not simply some people getting this or getting that because of their job, but rather actually viewing people as subhuman and as to be treated less than, of course, is one of the concepts that emerges from the Exodus narrative. And one of the interesting things, for example, is that the Bible presents the hero of the Exodus, Moshe Rabbeinu, working through the hand of God. We don't really find out about his yichus even until this week's Parsha. Meaning when we first heard about him in Parshat Shmot, the Bible just presented him as a simple person. Vayhi ish echad mi beit Levi vayikach et bat Levi. There was a man from Levi who took a woman from Levi. There was no sense of that there's yichus here. Every person. Moshe Rabbeinu could have been an everyman in the fact that he stepped up when there was a question of justice and there was a question of injustice. And it's only here in this week's Parsha we find out about his genealogy, so to speak, after the fact. Every person can step up and be, on some level, a Moshe Rabbeinu. Every family can step up. And we don't buy into the sense that people are less than, but there's an equality before the Ribono Shel Olam, before God, created in the image of God. And one of the messages of the Exodus that's constantly repeated, the key word in this week's Parsha, V'yad'u Mitzrayim, that Egypt is an educational component to learn about how the world really works and how the world should work. and how a world that is created in the image of God uh, should not simply see people as cogs to be thrown away and to be enslaved. And, certainly looking at the events in the last few weeks in our country with the horrific storming of the Capitol, the neo Nazi imagery, white supremacy, which was given uh, oxygen to, unfortunately, by our president, by President Trump, over the course of the last 4 and 5 years. The winks and the nods and the expressions and the way that those people were allowed to gain some level of legitimacy and see themselves in the image of the president. And especially during this week when we're about to commemorate the anniversary of the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King, who really represents a, a, a leader, the civil rights movement that really challenged, just like Moshe of old. And of course, as I've mentioned many times from the pulpit, Dr. King constantly used the Exodus imagery and constantly used psukim from the Torah to confront that and to talk about the legacy in terms of slavery, but more important in terms of devaluing other human beings and devaluing and thinking that if you have a little bit of an advantage because of this, then you are different, better, not just different, but you're better and you deserve to be treated with dignity, and other people don't deserve to be treated with dignity. And that's what I mean when I talk about social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, we talk about natural selection. Now, natural selection in the biological, in the physical world is something that's real, but it's something that we have to fight. I read recently, somebody suggested, and again, I'm not a biologist and I'm not a historian of science, but I saw that in the discussion about the coronavirus, someone suggested that, maybe 2,000 years ago, what we know as the common cold was also very much like the coronavirus. When it first, so to speak, hit humanity, lots of people probably died from things as simple as the common cold because we as a species had not yet developed immunity, had not developed any herd immunity. And millions and maybe tens of millions of people died from the common cold in antiquity. And that's just what you have to deal with, and that's reality. Yeah, that's part of natural selection, but it's something that we fight against. It's something, as Rabbi Soloveitchik so beautifully articulated in The Lonely Man of Faith, about Adam 1, about the human being who has majesty and overcomes illness. We don't simply accept that. The way at the beginning of the virus here, some people were simply willing to accept, yeah, a certain percentage are going to die, and that's just okay. And that's just the way it is until we get herd immunity. And that many people who are older are just going to have to, they're going to pass. And no, that kind of attitude, that kind of natural selection attitude, that some people are worth more. Not because you have no choice. Yes, sometimes you're in an unwinnable situation and you have to do triage. But the thought that we approach life with that attitude, no, we fight against natural selection. We try to create therapies and vaccines that try to undermine that notion that simply, okay, because you have the luck of the draw of certain genes or certain that you should live and other people should die. We fight against that. And that's the same thing we have to fight against. The attitudes that involve natural selection in the social realm, that some people just deserve because of their heritage or because of their current wealth or because of certain things in life, that they should reap all the glory and all the benefits, material benefits, social benefits, political benefits, and others should be kept down. White supremacy, neo-Nazism, all ultimately rooted in that kind of Darwinistic extreme. Obviously, it's a perversion in the social level. And that's part of this week's Parsha. Part of what's this week's Parsha of Yadu Mitzrayim. There's a certain knowledge that Mitzrayim and the whole world comes to know from the message of God, from the message of every person is created in the image of God, and that sometimes evil has to be confronted with power. That's not the ideal. That's not what we strive for. But sometimes Hakadosh Baruch Hu has to destroy the evil, confront the evil, and it has to be stopped in its tracks. And the different kind of ethos has to be communicated to the world. Wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Um, Again, we celebrate this coming Monday Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. We need that message even more so in our very divided, very polarized country. We need to affirm every human being is created in the image of God. Every human being should have an opportunity to participate fully, economically, culturally, socially, politically, religiously, in the way that they have been endowed with God's gift, and certainly in our democratic society, that we have to respect that, and we have to let everybody grow, and we have to let everybody have those opportunities and those blessings that are at the heart of our nation and are at the core of the democratic values that we hopefully will espouse and continue to espouse, and will hopefully be affirmed in Yirtzeh Hashem next week when we have the inauguration and the transfer of power to our new president and vice president. Shabbat Shalom.